You're listening to Two Guys Talking Wine with Michael Pincus and André Prue.
Michael.
André, that's very blue.
It is. We're in person.
Yes.
You're back.
Yes.
Before we get into what we're going to talk about, there's something new I'd like to try, and that is asking people who are listening to this podcast to support us. Oh. We usually wait until the very end, but if you go to patreon.com/2guystalkingwine, you know, I'll be honest, I know that we have a few hundred people who listen to each and every episode of Two Guys Talking Wine.
And we love each and every one of you.
But there's a few that we love a little bit more because they're mentioned in the credits at the end of the episode. But we really only have like 3 or 4 people that donate to us monthly to keep this on the air. The reality is with increased production value and increased interviews, our expenses are a little higher. And that
tariffs.
Means... Shut up, Michael. But I mean, you know, we're paying for stuff like gas and parking. And, you know, I've always talked about equipment. And I'm really grateful that donations to this podcast have given us at least part of the equipment that we have, which makes the podcast sound so good, minus you and me bringing it down. You know, I am just putting it out there that if we could get, let's just say 5 more of you loyal listeners to donate every month, it would really go a long way to helping us keep the lights on.
And you'd hear your name at the end of the podcast.
Well, it depends on how much they donate.
That's true. Yeah, check out the levels and everything like that. If you want to hear your name at the end of the podcast.
So you've been gallivanting all over Europe for the past third of a year?
Mostly Italy and France, but yes, there was some gallivanting. There will be more, but yes, there is gallivanting. And
on this episode of the podcast, we're actually not going to be talking about any of that.
No, we're not actually. Something that you did. So, I'm really happy that we're doing something that you did, because I came home and I put together a spreadsheet for you, and I said, these are all the interviews I did, and you went, oh my God, and and you said, but I have one. I go, great, we'll do yours.
Well, the other thing too is like we're pretty good at like splitting up the work on the podcast here. But like you sent me a note like tongue in cheek about a month ago. It's like, so when are you going to do something for us?
I did.
You definitely made great use of your time, and I'm really excited about the podcasts that are coming up. But you know, let's ease into this podcast a little bit. Do you drink a lot of like big brand wines? Like I know, like I perpetually like to crap on Yellowtail, but like and you know, like it's thinking about like the popular wines at the LCBO. It's just like I have a visceral response when I see Josh on the shelf, or when I see Bread and Butter or Seven Deadly Sins. Like these are wines that I just know are not good, you know?
I guess the biggest brand that I drink, and I'm happy to drink it, is Masi.
Masi?
Which is Italian. They're a large company.
Yep.
But they're still family owned, and I never see them as big brand, although I know they're big. They're a big name.
Montez is another one.
Montez would be another one. Yeah, I really like their Alpha. But again, all family owned.
Yep.
So again, I don't think of them as big. I always think big brands like Josh, because I don't know if I think Joseph Carr has probably sold that brand. I'm not 100% sure. Somebody can check me on that one. But you know, when you get that big, I'm pretty sure somebody's bought that. You know, Meiomi is a big brand, obviously been bought. Mondavi bought. Like all those
and
names.
the thing is, like Mondavi is in the process of trying to rebrand, and it's very pertinent to this podcast. I went down in 2018 as part of their Tokalon program. Like they're really trying hard to bring wine enthusiasts back to the brand because of the market perception of a brand like what is it, Woodfield.
Woodbridge,
the Woodbridge by Mondavi, that like the damage that has done to the brand.
Look, they branched off into so many things that it's hard to not think of them as a big brand.
Yeah.
And Wolfblass, same thing.
Yeah.
You know, Yellowtail, all these big brands that we've heard about. As I said, Masi is. I had one last night. I had a 2006. It was absolutely gorgeous. I also, for the most part, when I think of a big brand, I don't think of wines that age. Yeah. Like, I mean, you know, the Tokalon wines obviously do.
Yes.
But when I'm looking at that, I'm not thinking of big brand Robert Mondavi. At that point, I think of small brand Robert Mondavi. When I look at Woodbridge, I'm thinking plastic cork or screw cap. I'm thinking not age-worthy. I'm thinking... So that a lot of those wines I think of as... when I think of big brands, I think of not something I would want to put in a cellar.
Which is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It just is, because I think it's something like we've sort of glossed by it on this podcast a few times, that not all wines are made to be in a cellar, and just because a wine isn't cellar worthy doesn't mean it's a bad wine. It just means it's ready to drink now.
Correct. And the thing that I would say, before I let you get on to wherever you're going, is that you have a cellar, I have a cellar. When I get a wine, I don't usually drink it right away. I'm going to put it away, and then I forget about it. So if somebody gave me a bottle of Josh, I would probably forget about it, and 6 years down the road, I'm like, oh, geez, now what am I going to do? I guess we're going to find out whether Josh can age, right? So that's what happens to me.
And the next thing you know, you have an entire podcast series called Stump the Chump based on wines like that. So this is a pertinent discussion about where I want to take things. I'm going to read for you a quick quote from beverageindustry.com. This is a quote from Mike Wyatt, who is a client insights consultant for Chicago-based Circana. I don't know what the credentials are. I'm assuming he's a big deal, or else why would the magazine talk to him? But some of these are stats he's quoting. Collectively, the super premium and ultra premium segments perform the best across the table and sparkling wine. This growth can be attributed to an ongoing shift to premiumization within the wine category, as loyal customers are willing to pay a premium for perceived quality and go-to brands. Essentially, the $13 to $19.99 range proved to be the sweet spot with regard to growth and consumption. And then, quoting from the article, among the top table wines super premium brand Josh Cellars saw its sales up 14.1%, totaling $500 million, with case sales up 13.4%. So I find all that. I also find it interesting how the price of a bottle gets segmented when you're dealing with business people. Because, like, for me, I don't consider $20 ultra premium.
I guess not. No.
But I had a chance to go to an interesting tasting a few weeks ago now with Wakefield wines.
I love Wakefield. I'm gonna come right out and say it. I like Wakefield. I got the same invitation. I wanted to go. Problem was, I was still in Italy, where it was nice and warm.
Yeah, it was a chilly day that day, but I had a chance to sit down with Justin Taylor of Wakefield Wines. I want to thank him for giving me the time. Here's just how the interview started.
Justin Taylor, third generation family owner of Wakefield Wines. Been very lucky. Started in the family business in '97, which is a bit embarrassing to have to admit. But I think in family businesses that can happen, so please understand that. And I've been very fortunate. I did my apprenticeship, if you like, on the road, representing the family business in Australia as a sales rep. I then moved on to become national sales manager for almost a decade. I've literally been a bit of a global ambassador and account manager or senior sales manager all around the world for the family business for 25 years.
That's amazing. And you said still family owned?
Oh, 100% family owned. Yeah.
And the kids are getting involved in the...
Yeah. We're doing a lot of work on succession planning. I represent Generation 3. The plan is very much to hand it on to Generation 4. And we're very realistic about that. We've got to keep growing the business.
So there were a couple of things interesting with what Justin was talking about, but I think the segue I want to get into that is the fact that Wakefield is still 100% family owned. And like he did mention that, they're already doing succession planning, that like it's a lot of it's not like one family that owns it. There's siblings and cousins and this and that who are all involved in making sure this business is going. And we talked a bit about like large brands. I think it's one of the things when we're talking about millennials in general is we do have a bit of adversity to that corporate feeling. We're kind of seeing a bit of an anti-globalization movement, like a really strong support for mom and pop shops. The fact that you can get the best food. Like even living in Hamilton, like the most popular donut shops are not your local Tim Hortons, at least the people who love food. It's Granddad's Donuts, it's Donut Monster, it's the Donut Stop. So it's all... It's interesting to see what they've got set up in terms of succession and I guess trying to insulate being a large brand while still being a family brand. So
I want to hit on what you said about, families are important and food coming from a place and shunning big brands. It was brought up to me, and I having been in Europe for 6 months, I don't want to say I now have a European sensibility because I don't.
No, but you probably have a better understanding of the market having been there.
They were talking about de-alcoholized wine.
Okay.
And how the younger generation is getting into de-alcoholized wine. And nothing could be further from sense of place. Family owned. Like, you don't make de-alcoholized wine as ADX. You make de-alcoholized wine as a very large company because it is a mass market produced product if you're going to do it. It's basically Coca-Cola.
It's one of those things too. The process of removing alcohol from wine is not the cheapest process, but it is one of those things where it's a process of scale. The more wine you strip the alcohol from, the cheaper it gets to do it.
But then to get more and more of the flavors and everything, there's a lot of chemicals that go into it too. Yeah. So it's a very strange thing that we have this generation that's all about sense of place, wanting to deal with mom and pop, get away from corporate, and yet one of the beverages that they're moving right towards is as corporate as you get. And I can't understand it. It's and I don't know if it's on our topic here, but I'm just it's just one of those things that when it started to come to life to me, I had at least 3 winemakers say that to me, and I went, wow, it's weird.
It is weird, but if I have to make a prediction, I do think that the de-alcoholized wine movement is going to be a trend, and I don't think it's going to stick. Frankly, because the quality of the product isn't super great, and it's sort of like I had a chance to recently taste a non-alcoholic version of a wine. I put that in air quotes at Leaning Post, a sparkling. Ilya made the wine to try to hit the flavor profile of a sparkling Riesling, and it's tasty, but it's still not like scratching the right itch. I think the problem that we're having is it feels the same as vegan meat, and this is something I've definitely said on the podcast as well. Is it's just like, if you're vegan, there are so many great vegan options. Why are you trying to force something to taste like the thing,
like bacon? Why are you trying to make it taste like bacon?
That's it. But you've made a decision for ethical reasons or for whatever the reasons are. Like stick with it, because the substitution is not going to be as good as the product. And think about the steps that go into making it taste like what it's not supposed to taste like. Like the thing that the thing I love about non-alcoholic beer, when you get good non-alcoholic beer, is the fact that it's also lower in calories. So there actually are health benefits to it. But there are a lot of non-alcoholic beers out there where to get that texture of alcohol, you've substituted the de-alcoholized version for sugar.
For sure. Yeah.
And you're still getting 140 calories a bottle, and it's just like, okay, it's great that you've gotten rid of alcohol, which, for all intents and purposes is not good for you, but you've replaced it with sugar, which is also not good for you. No.
So back on to where you were getting.
Well, I mean, for me, it was just, I guess, kind of going the other way. Is like, I've become the textbook millennial at this point, where I've reached a little bit more career success over the past few years, especially since leaving radio. And I'm spending a little bit more money on the average bottle of wine, so drinking less. You tease me a little bit, I think tongue-in-cheek, about the fact I do dry January every year, and that's something I plan on continuing every January, because it's just something that I do enjoy doing. But the thing is, like, I'm not opening a bottle of wine necessarily 5 days a week in the house. It's more 3 days a week in the house, but it's a more choice bottle of wine. But my favorite thing about this tasting with Wakefield was we were tasting the white label, like the entry level wines in the portfolio, and they were of varying like quality, but like they were good. They were all good. They were all good price for value. But the thing is, it's just like I'm still looking for a bottle of wine that makes me excited, whether I'm spending $10 or I'm spending $70. And at $18.95, their white label Cabernet Sauvignon was eyebrow raising. It was just like, oh wow.
Yeah, it's interesting because they are an Australian company. And Australia, everybody thinks of as Shiraz. And if I'm not mistaken, Wakefield is really all about the Cabernet Sauvignon.
They got Shiraz too.
They do, but I mean, they really do. I like the line that I like from them consistently is the Jerriman series. That's
what we're sipping on right now.
That's the higher end of the entry level. I'm not even sure where it fits.
Well, it's $25. So according to that article I quoted off the top of the,
it's ultra
premium. It's ultra premium.
But I mean, they also have wines that are in the $50 range, $60 range, $80 range. So where does that fall into? Super duper premium? I don't know. But I mean, $25 for a big segment of the population is a splurge.
Yep.
Right? And so I have always liked the Jerriman, and I've always liked the Cab over the Shiraz. It's consistently a better product for me.
Yeah, I don't really. I agree with you completely. Just in terms of and I think it's just one of those things where I think I'm trying to be a little bit more cognizant of, I guess, slowing my roll a little bit. You know, I don't need to spend $50 for the sake of spending $50 and revisiting these really great, you know, entry level ultra premium brands is something that's really worth doing. Now, I guess just going back a little bit to the conversation with Justin about what they're doing in response to the market. These are the stories that I really love to hear, because I think it's one of the problems with large corporations that are chasing trends, you know? Like, I don't know if a company or if a brand like White Claw is going to continue to exist in 10 years when the whole vodka seltzer trend completely fizzles out, because I don't see like the vodka seltzers really becoming like a core staple in people's drinking habits, because there's always something that changed. Like when I was in university, like it was all the range of Smirnoff Ice and Mike's Hard Lemonade. Like, okay, fine, these are brands that still exist on the shelf of the LCBO, but I guarantee if you look at the sales data of 2001 versus 2021, we're looking at a whole different ballgame in terms of number of bottles moved.
Well, interestingly enough, I was, I don't know if I say I was lucky enough to spend some time with some youngsters yesterday. We were moving a fridge, and we needed to bring some younger muscle in, and so these guys are all in their early to mid 20s, and at the end they were offered something to drink. Wine was the first thing offered. They all said no. A beer was offered. One guy took a beer, and then somebody said, "How about a cider?" And one of the guys took a cider, and then finally the last guy took a cooler when it was offered. So it was really interesting, and they asked me some questions about wine, but they were saying that, you know, if they were going to drink wine, they would drink it maybe at a meal, and usually with a girlfriend. It's not a beverage that they would sit and watch a hockey game with, as you and I would probably do that. Or, you know, on a hot summer day, you and I would grab a white or rosé or something like that, whereas they're going to drink beers and coolers.
Or White Claw.
Right? And yeah, White Claw is another one of those crazy, you know, beverages that. But it's made its name during the pandemic, and now it's well,
wine does have a bit of an image problem, and you know, I think the current culture still needs to evolve to make it better. You know, like I think formal wine knowledge is great. Like it's great that it exists, that the infrastructure exists. But, you know, at the same time, like, good for you. You memorized the textbook. You memorized a textbook about how wines are made certain places. That doesn't mean you understand how, you know, an average consumer consumes.
A lot of wineries have a good, the best wineries have a good story. And I think that's more important than the technical knowledge of the wine.
Preach, brother. I mean, it's why we do this, this podcast. And I do want to make it absolutely crystal clear that I am not, like you and I are not crapping on sommeliers, because it takes a hell of a lot of work to get that formal knowledge. But I still think there is massive disconnect with formal wine knowledge and where the current wine world exists. But
the days of a colleague of ours, Michael Vaughn.
Yeah.
You know, who always wants to know the pH levels and always wants to know acidity levels.
Who cares?
And always wants to know lot numbers. You know what? That's a little too in depth. I think what people want these days is a good glass of wine, maybe a good story to tell a friend, maybe a good story to tell themselves while they're drinking that glass of wine. I do not think it's about, wow, how much alcohol is in that? Although sometimes I guess it does come into play. But you know what? A good glass of wine should never make you ask how much alcohol is in that.
So I want to play a longer section of my conversation with Justin, because a big part of the conversation had to do with where things are going. And I was actually really happy to have, someone involved on the sales side as opposed to the production side, someone connected to the family, because obviously this business means a hell of a lot to him, because his livelihood and his children's livelihood is depending on it. But, it's something that I tell my clients in my marketing business, and like everyone that I've worked with in marketing that I do, is I don't think I could ever work with a client where we're trying to fudge the truth, where we're latching on to something because of current trends. And it's something that really does bother me. Like we've seen it happen with a few wineries in Niagara, where it's just like they're so obsessed with chasing trends, they've abandoned core values. And that's something that Justin touched on in my conversation with him, where, I liked the wines going into this conversation, but I got a deep respect for the brand after Justin said things like this.
It's one of our company values. So it's actually one of our company values. And I think for us, and even here in Canada and in Ontario, like our St Andrews range of wine in Australia now, Wakefield, trading as Taylor's Wines back home, the family name, we're number 2 to Penfolds in wines above $50. So we're the number 2 option in premium wines and in luxury wines or flagship wines. We see there's a lot of opportunity, because like here, for instance, with LCBO, they use the St Andrews range, our wonderful St Andrews wines that come off our St Andrews vineyards that we bought in 1995. We bought the property. The vines date back to 1896, the winery and vineyards. So an incredible piece of winemaking history. But that range of wines, multi-award winning around the world. But really, do Canadians know that we've got these ones? They do, and our awareness numbers are really strong across Canada as a brand. But I think there's so much more ground for us. So yes, there's innovation to be done in these price points, but there's product already sitting there that I don't think we've really knocked on the consumer's door and said, hey, I know you know the estate range really, really well. I know that you enjoy the Jarramans, but we've got a whole lot more going on from Jarraman and above. So yeah, there's a lot to be offered.
I'll have to bug Profile to get to taste those wines, because I don't think that's what we're tasting tonight, right?
Tonight we're going to stay on temperature, and we're going to stay on degrees matters. That's our catch cry, that degrees matters, degrees centigrade. And we've got the thermometers on the back of every bottle. I believe we're about to extend that to the back of the Jarraman range as well. In the next decade or so. The centre of our universe, as far as our product offerings goes, is Estate and Jarraman. Estate's the foundation range. They're the products. The vines were planted in '69. My father and grandfather released them in '73, and it was the Estate range. So that's a super important range for us. But Jarraman, Australian Aboriginal for seahorses. We've got the seahorse logo on all the wines. Those two ranges are where our time and investment around the world will be spent on those two ranges.
Gotcha. It's just really focusing on entry-level premium.
Yeah. Look, what's your depends where you are in the world and your definition of.
No, I get that.
Yeah,
Well, I think I feel bad for how hard you have to work in this market because you're fighting against a bottle with a yellow kangaroo on it. That I know when I speak with my colleagues and I speak with fellow millennials, the perception of Australian wine is generally
is through that
a little
yellow kangaroo.
You've had a bad experience of drinking a little too much yellowtail Shiraz.
Yeah.
But when you come back to one of my favorite brands is Zante's Footsteps at about $20 to $25 a bottle, expressing the terroir of Australia. And every time I've tasted the Wakefield wines, I always have that aha moment where it's just like, this is only $20. So that's, when we're talking about that, that's entry level premium. Do you find that it's any sort of you talk about the brand recognition, but is that maybe something to have to fight against as well?
Look, I'm a pretty glass half full guy.
Love it.
And I think, look, Yellowtail to me just introduced a lot of people around the world to drinking Australian wine. How that experience is viewed is very individualistic, but a lot of people drank a lot of that wine. And I think our job is then to take them up the premium ladder. Is to take them up the premium ladder. And I think, look, it was an introduction through Yellowtail. Good on the Casella family and good on them for doing it. Hopefully, I always love our journey is more about entry-level promised land, and that's probably in your 20s, then in your 30s, you're onto the estate range and you've formed a relationship there. Then when you're into your 50s, you're really into Jarraman in a big way. In your 60s, you've met St Andrews, and then in your 70s, you're up there with you've already enjoyed Master Stroke. Then in your 70s and 80s, you're on the Visionary, the Pioneer, and then just as life couldn't get any better, you have a bottle of the Legacy, and you go to heaven a complete person.
I love that. I think it's the one thing that, and I hope Justin is listening to this right now, is he talks about those age gaps of when you get to the different tiers in the portfolio. I know for myself and with my circle of friends, millennials have had to work really, really hard to get to where they're at in their career now. And I think in our 20s and 30s, we had it a little harder than the generations before us. So we're jumping steps. I'm not waiting until I'm 80 years old to buy a bottle of Master Stroke or a bottle of Legacy. I want to taste those wines now while I still have some youth and the ability to eat whatever the hell I want with it.
One of the things that he mentioned there that brought me back to my trip to Australia and touring around in basically Orange and the Hunter was when I would taste some of these wines and I would go, this is not Shiraz, this is Syrah. And even down there, and even so many years later, they were all still. And Justin really, I guess, held back. I think what he's really thinking. I could be wrong, but the original marketing idea for Australia was to come in with things like Yellowtail, like Little Penguin, like Wolf Blass, and show Shiraz. And then once people started drinking copious amounts of Yellowtail and all of that stuff, was then to showcase the diversity of Australia like Zante's does, where they show the 4 or 5 different places that Shiraz is made. And we're seeing it now.
Yep.
But Australia is no longer on the uptick. They are leveled out, maybe on the downslide. Not sure where they are on the whole thing.
Well, I can't help but wonder if maybe the problem was the wines were too good at the price at the time. Because I think about this now so I was spending $16.95 in 2003. So this is before I got serious about wine. But my parents drank wine at home, and I have a soft spot in my heart for Wolf Blass because the yellow label was the house wine at my parents' house. And the thing is, those were the first wines that I got to taste when I was 19 years old, 20 years old. And I got to impress many a ladies in university by actually knowing, like one thing about one wine. But, I wasn't the guy taking a date out to a decent restaurant in Regina and ordering a beer. I could actually read a wine list.
Or the house wine. But the whole marketing thing was to then ratchet it up to show the diversity of Australia.
Yeah.
And Wines Australia or the big companies said, no, don't do it. We're making too much money.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's almost the same thing, too, with like what happened in Beaujolais with Georges Duboeuf, right? You chase the dollars, and at a certain point, you're taking your client base for granted. And the thing is, wine isn't sneakers or Coca-Cola. Like, wine is a unique product, especially when you're dealing with people who really give a crap about it.
And if you think about it, we can bring that even closer to home with Cellared in Canada, whatever they call it nowadays, international Canadian blends. We're bringing that right back home.
Yeah.
Because JT, Peller were making so much money that they don't want to see that disappear.
They still are making money.
Correct. They don't want to see it disappear. So instead of focusing everything on VQA, they want to keep that tier open for the mighty dollar at the expense of the smaller wineries that want to showcase terroir.
See, and that's the thing I don't understand. Like from a business standpoint, is it's just being proactive versus reactive, and it's just like you're gripping onto that segment of the market so hard, but you can literally see the winds of change blowing around you. And the thing is, I've been saying for 10 years since we started this podcast that there's a shitstorm brewing in California because those wines were so boomer-centric, baby boomer-centric in terms of packaging, in terms of marketing, and most importantly in terms of price point, that they neglected the entry level. And the thing is, as someone who's an enthusiast, what's in the entry level for California for André? Like, there's virtually nothing. So where have my stepping stones been to get me to Oakville, to get me to Napa Valley? And I'm really lucky that Mondavi brought me down there, that I got to skip that whole middle section that we didn't have. And I mean, I think that's why brands like Wakefield and Montez are so critically important, because drinking this $25 bottle of Jarman that we're enjoying right now makes it a hell of a lot easier for me to want to get my hands on the upper tiers of this winery, because if this is what you're giving me for $25, I want to see what's up there.
And I've always said that. I've always said that if you show off at $20, people are willing to make that jump to your next level.
So another thing that's near and dear, like we're talking about the market and changing drinking habits, Australia is not exactly known for its lighter reds.
No.
Or, frankly, its whites. And, Justin has talked about being true to the core values of the company and where they're going. But I said, like, how do you respond to the market when you're on a country continent that's known for Shiraz? And this is a pretty full-bodied Cab Sauv you and I are drinking right now. But here's what he had to say.
Look, in winemaking styles, you've got to keep listening to your consumer. If you stop listening to your consumer, you're on the way out the door, sort of thing. So you're always listening to your consumer. I think in this conversation, it's really important to be true to your DNA. It's be true to your DNA, be true to the terroir of the Clare Valley, which is where the majority of our product comes from. But at the same time, keep adapting. So I'll give examples. The Taylor's Estate Cab Sauv. If my father, who's alive and well, if my father cut himself, small amounts of blood would come out of Dad, but a lot of Cab Sauv. So are we going to mess with that style, that house style of ours that is quintessentially summarised by New World wines, but with Old World finesse? Are we going to mess with that? No. Where we will listen to the consumer and evolve, like, say, Chardonnay for us, our Chardonnay journey in the last couple of decades, we were very, typical Australia, we were very heavy oak, we were very buttery, we were very, very malolactic. And what's interesting now is 2 decades later, there's a lot of interest in that style again. So what we will probably do is listen to the consumer, do a different Chardonnay, potentially going back down that style. But a lot of our Chardonnay now is far more Burgundian in style. We've got some of the best French oak out of Latour, who are great partners of ours, out of their cooperage, finished French oak barrels, some of the best you can get. And so our Chardonnays now, and we've just had one listed with the LCBO, great choice.
Oh, fantastic. I'm a fan of your Chardonnay.
Yeah, so our Chardonnay, and the Clare was always funny, being Wakefield Wines. We'd always get recognised in awards for our Cabernet, our Shiraz, our Merlot, and of course our Riesling. But then Chardonnay, no one would ever give us, and we were like, come on, we can do this great varietal as well, but we had to work so hard for it. And to me, that's really what did the consumer want. It's also for us quite nice because it's gone back to that philosophy of New World wines on Old World finesse. It's a lot more Burgundian in style. And just a beautiful drinking wine. Now, are we going to do other great varieties? Yeah, are we into Pinot Gris? We are. Have we got some great rosé? So we've done that. Well, we play around with that. It's Pinot Noir based, but yeah, it's Pinot Noir based. We occasionally dabble with that blend, but predominantly Pinot Noir based. Our Pinot Noirs, we've evolved them. Clare, again, we're very true to the grape and true to delivering the best wine drinking experience we can to the consumer. So for instance, our Sauvignon Blanc and our Pinot Noir are both Adelaide Hills. So very old relationships there. We've gone with a bit of elevation, and I think we deliver. So for us, it's all about the great variety, what's the consumer after, and going down that path.
In spite of where the global trends are going, like I touched on this earlier, I love the fact that the company has clearly defined its style and knows what they do well. Like when he talks about sticking to their guns with Cab Sauv, I imagine if we'd said Shiraz, he probably would have said the same thing. And making a conscious business decision that you're not going to capture the whole market, but you're going to have a market that's going to appreciate what you're doing, and you're sticking to your core identity. And the thing is, like, over your career, actually over both of our careers, we've seen the taste in wines evolve to where we are now, right? Like, even when I first put pen to paper and opened up the airwaves on Newstalk 1010, we were still experiencing very much the Robert Parker influence on the wines at the shelf of the LCBO. And I think we're still going to be a decade out from that influence completely going away. So I think it's cool for a company, a family-run company that produces a hell of a lot of wine, to say, no, you know what? We are going to stick to what we know is good. And the part he's not saying on that is, you're deliberately excluding part of the market by making that decision.
And it's something they're from Australia, so it's interesting to hear that. I was just I interviewed people in France, I interviewed people in Italy, and if you're chasing a trend, you're already behind it.
Yeah.
And I heard that a number of times from a number of winemakers who said if you trace that trend, you're never going to catch it. So a lot of them, stick to, maybe they'll make a Pinot Gris here, they'll make a Sauvignon Blanc there, they'll do something with a Chardonnay. I'll tell you that you're going to start seeing a heck of a lot more whites coming out of Bordeaux. That is the plan. But, they're still going to make Bordeaux, red Bordeaux, right? They're not going to stop making red Bordeaux. If your house is 80-20, you're not going to see a sudden switch 80-20 white to red. No, they're going to continue to make. The market will either come back or it won't. But
that's it though. Is you need to find a way to build that stepping stone to bring people to your brand, especially if you're an ultra premium brand, right? Getting someone to the door to taste a great bottle of Bordeaux. Like, I don't ever want to see the really top end. I don't want to see Bordeaux go completely white. I buy Bordeaux. Your trip to Bordeaux made my life a hell of a lot more expensive because in spite of all the teasing that we do with each other, I do trust your opinion a hell of a lot, especially when it comes to making
You're gonna
ultra premium experiences.
You're going to be drinking quite well, my friend.
But I mean that's it though. Is it's just like the region has defined itself. It's how do you get people in the door? And I know we're going to touch on that in next week's episode when we talk to Danny Roland, where you talk a lot about how do we bring people to Bordeaux, because you have an entire wine region that literally told its entire customer base to fuck off and jump into bed with China.
Yep.
And when the Chinese market closed off, the prices had skyrocketed. You've abandoned your customer base, and now there's no way to bring you to it. I talk about the storm that was brewing in California. It's even worse in Bordeaux now.
Bordeaux's in a lot of trouble. They are.
So, I think just so we can maybe put a bit of a bow on this, because I did very much feel that my conversation with Justin was very positive. And, it's cool when you get a chance to do an interview where you're dealing with someone who's very media savvy and very media trained. And he was there, like the tasting I went to was talking about wine serving temperatures. And if you buy the entry-level Wakefield wines, they have a little thermometer on the back of the bottles that is very much reminiscent of the Coors Light Blue Mountain when the cans are cold. But, I love stuff like that because it makes the stuff that you and I do on this podcast accessible. It makes people maybe take an extra second to think about how they're enjoying their wine so they can enjoy it a little bit more. And, it's you're not inside the house yet, but you're at least on the threshold of getting into the house of becoming a wine snob when you're thinking about things like temperature, and it is going to make the wine taste better, and it is going to lead you to that next bottle where, you've spent $18 on a Wakefield Chardonnay, and you're serving it at 13 degrees Celsius, so that if you spend a little bit more money, to serve it at 13 Celsius, and that kind of stuff is really important.
Look, I am starting to get my back up on the word wine snob.
I'm embracing it.
I don't mind if people call me a wine snob. I'm more of a glassware snob than I am a wine snob.
That is true.
I will shun or look at you funny if you try to give me a wine. Again, back to my yesterday's experience, I saw somebody pouring white wine into a flute. So, and that was like...
Oh, are you ready to give up your flutes?
No.
Okay.
No, as I poured my sparkling wine into a flute. Although I did have a large argument about flutes and white wine glasses. But
we'll save that for another time. We've done that podcast too many times.
Not with a champagne producer this time. I was told not to ask them that question.
Okay, Michael.
But the idea, I think the whole point of wine snob is what turns people off.
Yeah.
It's what turns people off about wine is because they don't want to become a wine snob. And aficionado. People ask me, "Are you a sommelier?" And I also push back on that too. I'm not a sommelier. I'm a writer.
But neither am I.
I'm not trying to sell you a bottle of wine. That's what I always tell people. Sommelier is trying to sell you a bottle of wine. I just want to tell you what I think is good. That's where I come from.
Well, you know what? So let's put the bow on the gift here. The way we wrapped the interview, I think, was a little bit inspirational and sticks with. I think one of the core takeaways that we've touched on with this podcast as well is about just like knowing your brand, sticking to your brand, putting together an authentic product and, sort of sticking with that, which is something, when you're making conscious choices to stick true to core values, even if it's not something I dig, I can respect that a hell of a lot more than chasing trends. So for the last time, here's Justin.
We sort of wanted to stay true to quality winemaking and not just stick anything out there in the market. So, yeah, look, trends, if we all had that crystal ball, we'd be on a big golf course somewhere or something like that. I think stay close to them, but stay true to yourself at the same time and what you can and can't do. I think we can continue to premiumise. And I know it's the whole world of wine is premiumising. But I think once people start to discover what we call our flagship range of wines, it's from the master stroke up, it's sort of $50 and above, and there's about 10 of them. They are a fantastic stable of wines. And we do the flagship release each year. I want to do it more and more in Canada. So we've got to get a few liquor control boards on board to range them and go with us on it. But if you get to come to those flagship tastings, and you will be invited to them, it's just 10 superb wines, and every wine is standing up and speaking for itself and doing something different, and they're just great examples of terroir and great winemaking.
All right, I think that's as good a place as any to end it.
Fantastic.
So we have it on the record now that Justin invited us to taste those wines. So people at Profile, I hope you're listening to this right now.
Wasn't that in Australia, though?
No, he was talking about doing the releases in Canada.
Oh, dang
I don't. Listen, if
Dang it.
Justin wants to fly us to Australia, I'm not opposed to that either.
Look, we'll make a whole week of it.
So yeah, I mean, there we go. You and I sitting enjoying a $25 bottle of Cab Sauv, having a conversation about Australia. And you know, if you haven't had a bottle of Australian wine in a while, even if you are a snob, as much as we just railed against that, go grab a bottle of the German Cabernet Sauvignon. I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised. You'll enjoy the crap out of that wine.
Yeah, it's always, as I said, it's always a favorite, and I have a number of them in my cellar, and they age well. They age really well. And being under screw cap, I don't worry about them.
No, I mean, that's it. It's another great thing about it. So I'm André Wine Review at andrewwinereview.ca, now being updated regularly.
Woo!
Yeah, I know. It's my dude. I didn't update it for like 2 years, and I had to go 2 years of content to get posted up, which was not fun. I'm staying on top of it.
I posted a whole bunch of stuff while I was away. I've got
No
to
newsletter, though.
Get back. No, I still haven't figured out. I don't know what I want to do with the newsletter. It's one of those things. I want to make comments like, but yeah, I'm still trying to figure out the format of the newsletter that's going to be good. But you know what's coming, and I'm really excited about.
The Rosé Report.
The Rosé Report is coming. My videos are going to start getting a little bit different in them, making subtle changes every so often. So, always tweaking something just to make it interesting. I'm Michael Pincus from michaelpincuswinereview.com, the grape guy on most social media. And good night.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to Two Guys Talking Wine on iTunes.
Two Guys Talking Wine is produced by Adam Duran and Ken Little.